For 300 years, they came without warning. Out of the cold northern mists, dragon-headed ships would appear on the horizon, and within minutes, a peaceful town would be burning. To the people of medieval Europe, the Vikings were a nightmare made real. Raiders who struck from the sea, looted the holiest churches, and vanished before any army could ever catch them. But the Vikings were far more than mindless raiders. They were explorers who crossed oceans no one else dared to cross, warriors who carved out their own kingdoms, and legends whose names still echo 1,000 years later. These are the 6 most feared Vikings who ever lived. Welcome to History Nexus. Number 6, we begin with a son of legend. Bjorn Ironside was said to be the son of the most famous Viking of all time, and he more than lived up to the name. A fearless raider, Bjorn led one of the greatest Viking expeditions ever recorded, sailing a fleet out of the cold North Sea, down the coasts of France and Spain, and straight into the Mediterranean, the very heart of the civilized world. He plundered town after town along the way. And according to legend, when Bjorn reached the Italian city of Luna, he believed he had found Rome itself, the greatest prize imaginable. But the city walls were far too strong to storm, so Bjorn turned to cunning instead. He sent word that he had fallen gravely ill, wished to be baptized a Christian, and then that he had died. The trusting townspeople allowed his men to carry his coffin inside the walls for a Christian burial. And once inside, Bjorn sprang from the coffin, sword in hand, and his warriors seized the city from within. He earned his name, Ironside, because he was said to be almost impossible to kill in battle. And legend holds that he went on to found a royal dynasty of Sweden. Number 5 had a temper as fiery as his hair. Erik the Red earned his name from his flaming red beard and, some say, his equally fiery rage. Erik was a man who simply could not stop killing. He was banished from Norway for murder, so he sailed west to Iceland to start a new life. But in Iceland he killed again, caught up in a violent blood feud, and was exiled a second time. With nowhere left to go, Erik did something extraordinary. He sailed out into the unknown ocean and discovered a vast frozen island that no European had ever settled. He named it, with a marketer's genius, Greenland, not because it was green, but to lure other settlers into following him there. And astonishingly, it worked. Erik the Red founded the first European colony on Greenland, a settlement that would survive for centuries on the very edge of the world. A murderer and an outlaw had become the founder of a new frontier, and his son would sail even further. Number 4, that son was Leif Erikson, and he achieved something that would not be matched for 500 years. Around the year 1000, Leif sailed west from Greenland, further than his father had ever dared to go, and made landfall on the shore of an entirely new continent. He had reached North America roughly 5 centuries before Christopher Columbus was even born. Leif and his crew explored a green and fertile coastline they named Vinland, most likely part of modern-day Canada, where they built a small settlement and spent the winter. Think about what that truly means. The Vikings had crossed the entire Atlantic Ocean in open wooden boats with no compass and no maps, guided only by the stars, the sun, and their own breathtaking seamanship. Though the Norse settlement in the New World did not last, Leif Erikson had done the impossible. He had touched a world that Europe would not rediscover for another 1,000 years. Number 3 is the most legendary Viking of them all, a figure who lives somewhere between history and myth. Ragnar Lothbrok was a Norse king and warrior whose raids terrorized 2 great kingdoms at once. He sailed his longships up the rivers of France and laid siege to Paris itself, leaving only when he was paid a fortune in silver to go away. He raided the kingdoms of England again and again, until his name became the most feared word in the entire North. But it was his death that made him truly immortal. According to legend, Ragnar was finally captured by King Aila of Northumbria, who threw him into a pit filled with venomous snakes. And as the serpents struck and the poison took hold, Ragnar is said to have laughed at his own death, declaring how the little piglets would grunt if they knew how the old boar suffers. He meant his sons. And when those sons learned how their father had truly died, they would unleash a vengeance that shook all of England to its core. Number 2 is often called the very last great Viking. His name, Hardrada, meant the hard ruler, and he earned every letter of it. As a young man, Harald fled his homeland after losing a desperate battle and traveled all the way to Constantinople, where he joined the legendary Varangian Guard, the elite Viking warriors who protected the emperor of the mighty Byzantine Empire. For years, he fought across the Mediterranean and the Middle East, amassing an enormous fortune in gold before returning north to seize the throne of Norway by force. He ruled for decades as a warrior king, feared across all of Scandinavia. Then, in the year 1066, Harald made his final, fateful gamble. He invaded England with a great army to claim its crown for himself. At a place called Stamford Bridge, he was met by the English king, and after a savage battle, Harald fell with an arrow through his throat. His death that very year is often marked as the end of the entire Viking Age. And the single most feared Viking of all was a son of Ragnar himself. Ivar the Boneless was a living paradox. His strange nickname suggests he may have suffered from a condition that left his legs weak or brittle, so that he was at times carried into battle upon a shield. And yet Ivar was perhaps the most brilliant and most terrifying war leader the Vikings ever produced. When word reached him of how his father Ragnar had died in that pit of snakes, Ivar's fury knew no bounds. He united the sons of Ragnar and assembled the largest Viking force the world had ever seen, the Great Heathen Army, and he unleashed it upon England. This was no simple raid for plunder. This was a war of conquest and of vengeance. Ivar swept across the kingdoms of England, and when he finally captured King Ila, the man who had murdered his father, his revenge was so brutal it became legend. Ivar conquered vast stretches of England and founded a Viking realm that would endure for generations. A genius, a conqueror, and a nightmare. The most feared Viking who ever lived. Bjorn, Erik, Leif, Ragnar, Harald, Ivar, raiders and explorers, kings and legends. For 3 centuries, the Vikings shaped the very destiny of Europe, burning its towns, founding its cities, sailing further than anyone believed possible, and leaving behind a legend that has never died. They were far more than the savage raiders of myth. They were among the boldest and most daring people who ever lived. So tell me, which of these Vikings would you least want to face? Drop your answer down in the comments. Subscribe to History Nexus, where history connects, and remember this: the people the world fears the most are very often the ones it never saw coming.